Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with fintech leaders for a bit of a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and in today's show, I'm delighted to welcome back somebody who was last on the show 3 years ago, Katrina Donaghy of Civic Ledger. Katrina, welcome to the show.
3 years ago. Hello, Dexter. So good to be back. 3 years ago. That's amazing.
It is. Look, and I think, first of all, what I want to say to you is, it's also, a testament to anybody who was on this show 3 years ago who is still here doing what they're doing and kind of pushing their vision and mission forward. So, it's amazing to, and reassuring to have you with us as well, because it is such an important mission that you're pushing.
Yeah, thank you. Look at it. It is. I always feel like every year when we get to the start of January, I feel like I've rebooted. So even though it's been 7 years since Civic Ledger was created on the back of, doing a proof of concept with the Queensland government, I still feel like every year I get to the start, I reboot. Because the industry has moved so fast, the technology has moved so fast, and regulation. So we have to reinvent ourselves all the time. Stay on our mission, but really keep on questioning what's our purpose, why are we here, what are we building?
Yeah. Now, for those listeners who didn't tune into the first show that we did 3 years back, would you mind telling us a little bit more about Civic Ledger and the big problem that you solve?
Yeah, so Civic Ledger was founded in late 2016. Back then, nobody really knew what this technology blockchain was going to do. We sort of saw the banks playing around with the consortiums and things like that. But Lucas Cullen and I, who's a co-founder of Civic Ledger, we got together and we did a proof of concept with the Queensland government before we founded Civic Ledger. And what we were really interested in is its application to solve some efficiency problems in government. When we transact with government, it's quite frustrating. It's paper-based. We've got to keep on identifying ourselves. And so we saw that there was a really interesting opportunity to look at things that are valuable to us as consumers or citizens that allow us to do things that have been issued by governments, such as rights, licenses, and things like that. So we actually got to work with the Queensland government, explore how that would work with blockchain. And we worked with Bitcoin and Colourcoin to issue a community liquor license through what looked like a government platform, and then issue that into a wallet, and then show the metadata and the history on the Bitcoin blockchain. And because that was 2016, we sort of realized that perhaps that we had an interesting market product fit, and hence why 2016, most of the companies are still around from that stage have Ledger Chain block in their names, because we thought it was really cool. So the Civic Ledger was founded to look at the civic applications of blockchain technology to improve transparency and accountability. We've come a long way since those early days, but we knew way back then that highly regulated asset classes would be really useful with this technology because we were tokenizing them back then.
Yeah.
And now we know that tokenization is the killer app for this technology because of digital assets.
Now, one of the things that I've kind of always, and I'm not a technologist, but I've been around a fair while, and I always like to use the analogy when I'm looking at particularly, the kind of digital asset space and tokenization, and particularly, cryptocurrencies and the kind of technology behind that. I always think of myself as a young boy in the 1980s, and back then, kind of on-demand entertainment was, I had a cassette recorder, a black and white TV that had 3 channels and a radio. And, if you were to think of on-demand entertainment back then, right, like the evolution was, hey, you got a video recorder, and there was an argument between which was better, Betamax or VHS. Then we went to DVDs. Now my kids, can get basically access to anything, anywhere, anytime, right? Whether it's a movie or it's some, home-produced content. I like to think of, kind of the journey of blockchain as being very similar to that, where a lot of people have got kind of obsessed by whether VHS or Betamax is the better, and that neither are the right technology that is actually going to be at the, you know, the thing that actually delivers the dream or the ultimate vision. What's your kind of sense as to, you know, and the journey that you've been on, Katrina? You talked about Bitcoin there as being the, you know, the original thing that you used. What's your kind of view on the technology itself?
Look, I have to agree with you. I think when we go back to 2014, 2015, it was almost like we're having a conversation around the internet all over again. You know, what is this thing? We never talked about why blockchain. It was always about what is it? And I got really I got quite bored going into meetups after meetups after meetups, because obviously we were involved with the meetups back in the early days, where everyone was obsessed with, well, what is it and how does it work? And we were like going, well, you're going to code it? And they're like, no. And we said, well, why do you want to know how? Well, we talk about why.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why. Why would we use this technology? And I think what was hard for us back then is because there was no one around. It was very early. We had to establish ourselves as thought leaders in this space. So we really had to sort of think deeply about the technology and continually have conversations about why. And obviously we were faced with the big bank consortiums going hardcore into private blockchains.
Yeah.
And so because we've always been public blockchains for the reasons of the, you know, ultimately you want trustlessness. That's the whole purpose of this tech. So why would you use private blockchains to reach that goal? So we were constantly barraged.
Yeah.
People going, why aren't you using a private blockchain? We're going, because why? Why would you use one when the goal is that accountability and transparency? So we've ridden the entire waves from the Bitcoin to the Ethereum, the ICO of the Ethereum, right through to ICO. So we can actually sort of say BC ICO. So because BC ICO, well, before ICOs, it was very driven through a social science or a socioeconomic lens.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of great thought leaders globally who were talking about how blockchain technology can reorganize governance in society, how it can reshape how we share value with each other that is peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And I came from government. I spent 20 years in government, worked at Brisbane City Council, urban utilities. And it got to me because I'd studied, I'm a Bachelor of Arts graduate, did humanities, political theory. So when I found this tech, or when it found me, it spoke to me because I understood socioeconomics.
Yeah.
So we actually walked away from that conversation and moved straight into the ICO, which then it became the focus of the coin and focusing of raising, obscene amount of money on an idea, on a coin or a token that was never going to have any utility. So we had to ride through that wave. I remember that year in 2018, nobody wanted to work with us.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
We'd gone from working with the Australian government on the water markets and IP Australia around tokenizing patents to building out property development pipelines, and then nothing.
Yeah.
So for a whole year, we had to ride it out, and it was really quite horrific. But we always knew that at the end of the day, the utility would finally be found, and we would start to move away. And obviously then we went through the NFT. We had the bull runs. We've had everything.
Yeah.
And we've just had to buckle down and ensure that we're consistently having a conversation that was based in pragmatism.
Yeah.
A pragmatic conversation. And also our chosen sector, government, people thought we were crazy. But, we now have a lot more clarity because it's now been 7 years into the future. But it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. Where have you kind of got the inspiration from to keep going through, these cycles and, the same thing again? It was like when FTX collapsed, it was like, oh, here we go again, right? It's like, kind of the same challenges around, great, decent people working hard, trying to make a vision come true. And then you get the shysters and the kind of fraudsters and, kind of pulling the rug from under everybody whilst you're trying to build.
Oh, that's a big one. Look, I think, it's hard. Sometimes I fall out of love from my industry. I fall out of love. Sometimes I have a volatile relationship with my industry because I love everybody desperately for what they're doing. Because the only reason when we go back to when we were building in 2016, the EVM or the Ethereum virtual machine was still emerging, and there was no documentation. Smart contracts were awful and everything was just awful. And we had to build everything our own. And I sit back and wonder now in 2023, and I now know what we as a company are using, because other companies have solved problems from an infrastructure level. And I get inspired by that we've got these companies now that are now enabling us to work better because they've solved those problems that we had to do everything ourselves back then. That's what I love. I love the innovation. I love that it's community driven. I love that it's from the bottom up, that we haven't asked for permission to do this. And I get wonderment that, 13 years since the white paper, it's 15 years. And in 15 years, we've built this entire global economy whereby we've got governments across the world looking at CBDCs. We've got governments looking at regulation. We've got countries adopting Bitcoin as their currency. That's obscene if you go back 15 years ago and you remember when there was just like, we were having our very first conferences and there'll be like 100 people turning up and it was all of us. To now, because I was in Singapore in 2022 all of a sudden ESG is now the thing. So at Fintech Singapore, all you saw was ESG and blockchain. Now everybody wants to build a carbon market. So you have to, you have this love-hate relationship, because every time I read Cointelegraph every morning, I cringe. I go, great, another rug pull. Oh, great, another this, another hat. But I think we have to pull apart how the technology comes together. We work in blockchain space because we believe in the ledger. It's fundamental accounting. And when you think about everything that we do is an accounting transaction, everyone's a buyer, everyone's a seller, everyone's an investor. So everything we do requires a ledger. And I get really inspired by that because it is the ultimate method of giving two people in a transaction the ultimate confidence that they can interact with each other without having to know each other, and have that confidence that a contract's going to execute, that they're going to get the goods as though they are. And I think when we think about equality, access, democratization, I get inspired by that. And I think also because of the area that we work in, which, I'll communicate that to your listeners who didn't hear me 3 years ago. But, we got started when we were 6 weeks old. I remember the Australian government had some challenges out in the marketplace under their Business Research and Innovation Initiative. And one of those challenges was, how do we solve confidence in the Australian water markets? Now, we just finished doing our POC with the Queensland government. So we digitised a right, basically. And when you look at water markets, you have to have a right to interfere with water. And there's rights and restrictions and responsibilities associated with that very important asset class. And in Australia, globally now, you can't look left and right without actually having a problem with water. We've transgressed the water sustainable yield of the planet. And every industry on the planet has a water footprint. Data centers, computer chips, agriculture, industry, mining, environment, indigenous. Everybody actually has needing to access to this water. And when we got involved with it all those years ago, we actually knew way back in 2017 that at some point in the future that this would become, even though we knew back then, that it would become the most important asset class on the planet. And we've had an opportunity to build a solution that actually solves the problem of that accountability and transparency. So now we can truly account for how much water is in the watershed, how much is being used by all the beneficial users, and how water is being shared across those asset classes or those beneficial users. And to me, that is inspiring to know that we as a company have zoned onto something that is fundamental, important for billions of people on this planet. And when you actually start a company and commit yourself to the next 10 years of your life, you've got to be inspired. Plus, you need to inspire the people that choose to come with you on your journey.
Well, I was gonna ask you that, because what you're talking about is visionary, and look, kind of, to me, it feels like it's decades away, right? That kind of the nirvana that I talked about, they kind of using that analogy of the on-demand entertainment. I absolutely, kind of believe as much as you do that what you've talked about will inevitably be the outcome. I don't know what the timeline is, but I think of, my home where I've got solar energy, right? And I've got a battery and I send it back to the grid and they give me money. I'm like, well, why can't I just trade that for water or trade that for, keep it on the ledger so that when actually it's nighttime and it's freezing cold and the battery's down, I can pull from the grid and I don't get charged for it. These kind of simple things that you go, okay, what is money? Like, what actually was the purpose of money?
Well, I think one of the challenges is that the technology is not the challenge. I mean, anybody can build stuff with tech. You can sit in we see kids building out some amazing stuff. But the conception is that the technology has to have a contextual relationship with society. It has to have a contextual relationship with governance. And when we think about governance, the first thing that we move to is compliance and regulation, regulatory compliance, top down. I need to be compliant. And when we look at the way water has been working in Australia for the last 20 years, and I have to, put a footnote in here, is that Australia is the best in the world when it comes to understanding the relationship or the role of water markets to ensure that we can exchange water with each other and it's getting allocated to its highest value use. But there's 15,000 irrigators in Queensland and there's something like double that down in the Murray-Darling Basin. So you've probably got around maybe, 100,000 agricultural farmers who are actually extracting water on a daily basis, and 99% of them are doing the right thing. But we've got this entire regulatory regime trying to catch people out doing the wrong thing. And as a result, it becomes a heavy burden to everybody else because it's very costly to be compliant. So we remove that. We completely extract that from the transaction because we're able to build the rules into place where water is taken and have those rules and that metadata associated with the liter of water so we can start moving to bottom-up governance. So these concepts were impossible 10 years ago, impossible. But now we can rethink that, but it has to be through the lens of governance and design and principles such as governance, access, equity, democracy. And I think the challenge is for a lot of people who are moving into this technology for the first time is that they think it's this abstract thing. And we keep on saying, no, it's actually redesigning business models to move governance from here to there. But you have to start to break down those boundaries. And that's hard work because humans don't like to change.
Well, that leads on beautifully to my next question, because everything that you shared there, you taught it through the lens of the space that you're operating in. But then there's the technology piece, and kind of one of the frustrations that I've got is we've got so many different voices now, so many different governing bodies. There doesn't seem to be a kind of one coordinated voice where so many messages. It kind of seems to me, kind of as a supporter from the sidelines, that the voice that screams loudest gets heard, and oftentimes that's not the voice that should be listened to. And I wondered if you had any ideas around how you take the experience that you've had and what perhaps you would do that we could, as a tech industry, kind of get together and start to kind of get some of the results that you've got within the water space.
Yeah, look, there's so many answers to that question, but I think we have to remember that, again, one of the beautiful things about the community and the industry is that we haven't waited for permission from government or big corporates to self-organize ourselves. So the earliest association that was created in Australia was the Australian Digital Commerce and Cryptocurrency Association. And that actually became a very interesting space because it was the only association around at that time that government could actually speak to. And this is when the Senate was looking at the double spend on the double GST on the Bitcoin. Yeah. It was through the ADCCA way back then that it actually facilitated conversations with the Australian government to say, hey, we need to have a conversation around Bitcoin. You're actually double taxing it. And they're like going, what do you mean we're double taxing it? So they actually requested a Senate inquiry, and it actually happened. And as a result, the double GST was taken off the Bitcoin. So it's these 4 individuals or 5 individuals who took the initiative, but not from the point of view of their own egos. It was because they were so committed that Australia needed to be part of the global conversation that they actually formed the association as a volunteer and had started having the conversations. And then the next thing that happened was AUSTRAC, because we had the emerging cryptocurrency exchanges, and they were like, trying to self-regulate. So again, the ADCCA sat down with AUSTRAC and said, look, we need to sit down and discuss some rules. So I was very lucky because I got then we actually changed our names to the Australian Digital Commerce Association, and I became a director in 2018, I think it was. And now it's known as Blockchain Australia. So it has been an evolution, but there was always just 2 of us in the room, Fintech Australia, Blockchain Australia. There was us. And now it's tens. But I think it's time. I think all the associations emerged for a particular reason. But I think now that the Australian government and our state governments and globally, we're talking about a digital economy. So I think we now have an opportunity because we've reached our goals. We've got the Australian government talking. We did all of this work. We've now got regulation. We've got Senate inquiries. We've got Treasury papers. We've got all this stuff going on. So I think now we have an opportunity to sit down as a collective and say, well, what's the next 10 years? So I think we're now ready to have that next mature conversation. So I'm quite excited. We've got Blockchain Australia Week. We've got Intersect coming up. So I think we've got now those opportunities to come back together and say, where are we going next?
I've actually dropped the term blockchain from a vocabulary because for me, it's like the technology is the purest form of fintech. How do we use this technology to recreate the models that you've talked about? And as much as I've got a lot of admiration for many of the businesses and people in my network, as a customer and a consumer, I kind of look and think, hey, you're getting the home loan to me quicker, but it's still the same shitty home loan that I got 30, 40 years ago, right? Where's the difference? I think what I'm starting to see now, which is really exciting and encouraging, are businesses now who are using this technology and going, how do we actually, we got trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of value locked up, right?
Absolutely.
How do we unlock that and share that? And
agreed. And when we, just going back to the water story, because it's such an important story, particularly, as I said, El Nino's back on our shores and we're going to go back into drought. We're going to have fires. And so we're going to go back into that cycle again. But the thing people don't understand is that water markets are very illiquid. To excuse the pun, we use a lot of puns.
It sounds like nature's going to rug us again.
Oh no, she's just trying to have a conversation with us. She's just trying to wake us up.
Yeah.
But markets are illiquid, and markets stop. They are not accessible to everybody. So we have a lot of smaller players that opt out, and as a result, they don't optimize their assets if they're not using them, because they just don't trust the way things work right now. And we're seeing inquiry after inquiry after inquiry. We had the ACCC inquiry, we have productivity inquiries, we had the Royal Commission of Inquiry. We continually have inquiries in this country to go, oh, what is the problem? Why aren't the markets working effectively? We're comfortable in talking about about carbon markets and calling for a carbon exchange, for example. We're really comfortable in saying, oh, well, we've got the right to repair nature bill going through at the moment. So we're comfortable in having a voluntary biodiversity market, but we need to be thinking about, how that's going to look in terms of how that's going to turn from, into an exchange. But when we talk about water, it's like, oh no, that's too political. Well, we can't talk about water because it's too political. And you're going to go, well, when can we have this conversation? Because we just continually have these Royal Commissioners of Inquiries spend ridiculous amount of money of taxpayers' money and say, we think we know how to solve the problem, but it's just too political.
On that point, are there any countries out there that you think, Australia should try and emulate or get inspiration from, that you think are doing a doing it the right way?
Oh, I think we have to look to Asia. I think Vietnam, like I've got a call with Thailand straight after this, but Vietnam, India, we've got countries all around of us who are just basically just taking it forward and saying, look, we look at Africa, look at countries whereby they've got a high youth population that are already digitally native. They have like millions of developers in their population that can work to solve these problems. And I don't think that their governments are afraid. Look at China is going to be committing, they want 500,000 blockchain developers. So they're actually investing in that because they know how critical that is in terms of if they've got that internal capability, it means that they become a better economy. Now, we can all disagree and agree and disagree on the whole concept of China, but we don't seem to have that urgency here. We don't seem to think that this technology is something that we have to focus on. So I was doing Shark Tank at my children's school yesterday with kids in grade 11 and 12, and they're still thinking that Insta is the tech. It's not the tech, guys. But at universities, you don't talk about blockchain until you get to postgrad. So you don't even get to talk about blockchain in the humanities. You don't talk about this tech in law. It seemed to be a privileged position once you get into postgrad, and that's just too late. It's just too late. And I know you're very passionate about the talent industry, but we're actually doing ourselves a disservice because we think the digital economy is a PDF in the internet.
Yeah. Pitch deck, right? And I think this has always been a frustration of mine. We talk about, and I keep hearing about digital transformations. I started working in offices in the 90s when we went from paper-based to computers. That was the digital transformation, right? What you've been doing since then is faffing about and wasting trillions of dollars on not actually driving the technology forward and actually, as you said, focusing on what is the big problem we're trying to solve and, what might success look like. And I think it's just been, let's take all the stuff that we used to do on paper and digitize it. And we're still seeing that approach, right? Like 40 years into the digital transformation.
Yeah, look, I've been, I'm quite old. So, when the internet was born and I got my first email when I was about 22, when I was at university. But I think we've got to, I don't know, as you know, I've been doing this, we'll be 7 in September. And as I said at the start of the podcast, I sort of feel like every year is a brand new, like we're back to year 1. But having said that, we've got a lot of lessons and learnings and understanding. And we now know how to build with the tech and how to document it and how to put together agnostic taxonomies and things like that. So our tech can actually go across jurisdictions. Because I remember when we worked with IP Australia in 2018, turning patents into NFTs, we used to sit down and talk about, well, how do we actually share this information supply chain into other jurisdictions? And even right back then in 2017, we're talking about data structure, taxonomies and things like that. And that's one of the barriers to this adoption. Like with a customer that we're working in Queensland, we spent, because I work in Excel, and Excel is not a database. But please don't think it's a database because it's not. But it's consistent. Businesses and government work in Excel spreadsheets. So if you're transitioning from Excel to blockchain technology, it's not a simple case of a start or a blockchain provider saying it's a plug and play. We'll just put a blockchain in there. No, it's so much more work because you've got to do a lot of understanding about what that information is and what its relationship to a workflow and what its relationship is to legislation and regulation and rules. And you've got to really grasp all of that. And that's not a blockchain-led thinking. That's a case of looking at how we know we've got to program this information. We've got to put code into it to automate it and put the metadata so we can actually track and trace it. So it takes a lot of time, but we've taken the customer on the journey. We've taken them from Excel to blockchain. And for them, they actually now understanding that their role is now transitioning from this top-down compliance, which has always been their focus, to now bottom-up governance. how do we actually now work closer with our customers to ensure that they're actually optimizing their water allocations so we can have more employment, grow more food, remain sustainable. And this is what this technology has now been gifted to them, because all of a sudden they can actually see the decision making in each data point and each volume of water. They can now agree, this is the transformational process. But if you think about that from the lens of every vertical on the planet, and it's taken this long, we have still a long way to go.
Yeah. We're coming to a wrap up, Katrina, but before we do, as we talked about, you recognized that the Finnies this year, Blockchain Business of the Year. I think when we first connected was 2018 when you were recognized for Emerging FinTech of the Year. It's been a journey. Look, there's a lot of, I guess, founders and people out there in the industry now where it's been a tough 12 months. I think it's going to continue to be a tough environment. Funding, if we look at it, compared to say 2020, 21, 22 is way down. However, funding is still way up from where it was when you started out in 2016. And I just wondered if you kind of had any tips or words of advice to people out there around how you get through these types of cycles and periods, because they are cycles, right? Things always kind of come back. How do you've shown a remarkable resilience to kind of go through not only the fintech and the funding cycles, but then the stuff that's happened in crypto that's impacted you as well, around, the ICO craze that we had and then the FTX crash and, the kind of challenges and the stigma that comes with that, as well as the funding issues. How have you kind of navigated through those periods?
I think just because we have blockchain as our technology tool of choice, it doesn't differentiate us from a SaaS or someone who's working with drones or precision technologies or IoT. It doesn't matter. I mean, we're all startups and we're all trying to get customers and raise capital and stuff like that. Just because I have a technology that I use called blockchain, I ignore that. I focus on working, doubling down on our, customers. It's called customers, people. Customers is a reason for your being as a company. So you keep on focusing on your customers, you double down on your customers and you double down on the product. And you continually have those conversations. Look, I'm not saying it's easy. Civic Ledger has not raised since 2018. We have not taken new capital into our company since 2018. It's now 2023 and you kind of go, well, that's crazy. And I said, well, we just don't fit anywhere. We've never been that company that VCs fell over themselves to get to us because they just didn't quite understand what we were doing. So where we are now is that because we've now got customers and we've got contracts to build, to operationalize and stuff like that, that I'm kind of glad that we didn't take capital during the crazy times, because the company, to be a sustainable company, you need to build a valuable company. And that valuable company comes down to your people and your culture and your product and your customers and how you constantly think about building, focusing on your customer and listening to your customer, listen, and listen to the industry that you're serving. So it's pretty old-fashioned stuff, really. There's nothing super duperly magic about it. Look, we've had our hard times and we still have, areas of stress, but we're now seeing the light. And I think it's because we I don't know what the answer is, but all I know is we're still here and our product is solving a real problem. And that real problem is now escalated to such a level now that the globe is petrified of water security. And we just happen to be ready now because we've had 6 years to get here. We're now ready to deliver that product to the world.
I was just going to ask, are you going to be another one of these overnight 10-year successes?
Yeah, I always say that. 7 years now, yeah. So absolutely, it's a 10-year success.
I think what's amazing about what you've said, though, Katrina, is that kind of everybody's looking for the the shortcut. There are no shortcuts. It's kind of, it's just universal. It's how the universe works. It's hard work. It's, solving a problem that people care about that's big enough. It's about, being resilient. I think, the frustration that I've had with, kind of parts of the industry, and I think this was really evident in, 21, 22, where it was literally, come up with a dumb idea, put a pitch deck together, go out and raise money, and you're getting $6-7 million seed money.
If you are in this business and there's, founders like myself who know from experiences that when to cut out the noise. And you just let the ones that want to chase the rainbows go chase the rainbows. But that's fine. You've got to have rainbow chasers. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that what's your purpose. And as my company can never be anything. I'm nothing without my people that work with us. So Fraser and Fahad and Nak and Tanapat and Joey and Wei Yin, I can't be anything. I can't do this, but I've got this amazing team that are driven through the purpose of what we do. And they are working with this technology in 100% way. I'm not just telling them to sprinkle the blockchain into it and we'll just do some, smoke and mirrors. This is hardcore tokenization, hardcore blockchain technology, hardcore accounting. And they are thriving because they are being challenged on a daily basis and their growth has been incredible. And I am forever grateful to them. Fantastic.
Well, we're going to wrap up, but what can we expect from Civic Ledger in this next 12 months?
I'm hoping that we're going to basically see our customers using our tech and our customers will start talking and we don't have to talk anymore.
Well, Katrina, it's been great to have you on. Thanks for the update. Look, congrats as well on just, sticking with the journey, sticking with the vision, and just being true to what you set out to do in the first place.
Oh, thank you, Dexter. And I appreciate what you do for our industry and our ecosystem too.
Thank you. And where can people find out more about Civic Ledger?
Our usual website, civicledger.com, me on LinkedIn, Civic Ledger on LinkedIn. We have Twitter and all that sort of stuff. But get in touch. Always happy to book 15, 30 minutes just to sort of give my wisdom so they can shorten their pain period from 7 years down to 2 or something like that. Save them 4 years of agony by saying, don't do it that way, don't do it that way. Don't do
it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as always, folks, you can catch up with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're tuning in for the first time, make sure that you follow us and leave a review. We got over 250 interviews, and obviously that one with Katrina that we did 3 years back, which you can check out in the back catalogue. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. You got no idea how much it means to me that you spend your time while you're walking the dog or at the gym, listening to my dulcet tone. Until the next episode, keep well. Tier 1 people, leaders in executive search for fintech and the digital economy. We'll help you bring in world-changing leadership talent to build world-changing ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.